Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm sat across from a man who once punched Tom Cruise in the face because he cut him off on the highway to the danger zone. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who doesn't do road rage, only rage.
The only thing more impressive than punching Tom Cruise in the face would be beating him in a foot race. If you don't know, in every Tom Cruise movie, there's an infamous scene of Tom Cruise running.
Yeah, but I don't think he's that fast. Like, you know, I really don't.
He's fast enough to beat everyone to the top of the box office, because whenever Tom Cruise runs in a movie, there's a direct revenue correlation to Tom Cruise running scenes and movie revenue.
Really? Why do you know this?
Because I read about it.
Okay. I don't even know how you get to reading something like that. Anyways. All right. Well, this is episode 100, which, you know, there's some things that I feel proud of in my life. Actually, there's quite a bit in my life that I feel proud of. I'm actually proud that we've gone to 100th episode, because that means we've been at it consistently for 2 years, which is literally, we're recording this. It's a little bit before 2 years since we launched our first episode.
This is our 100th episode.
100th episode.
What a privilege. Thank you guys, everyone that's on live. It's a privilege to get to do this. It's a privilege to get to do what we do. And more importantly, not just, you know, honestly, at this point, with the value that I've seen out of it just in my own life and in our relationship, like, I would do this if no one listened.
Yeah, 100%.
But the fact that so many people listen and get value from it, and we've even got people here on this call live with us.
Yes.
If you are listening to this as a recording, this is different than our other episodes. We've got people on live with us in the Discord and in Zoom participating in this live with us. So this is going to be a very different episode than what we normally do. We're going to be answering a bunch of audience questions, very different than some of our topics or guests that we do, but we are going to answer questions that are mostly relevant to the Impossible Life audience.
And the thing is, these are people from our Mindset Mastery, and we have people all over the country and actually the world. We qualify because we have one of our friends from the UK on with us as well. So thank you so much to all you guys for coming on with us. It's amazing that you guys would be willing to join us for this. And we did want to do something different for the 100th, which is why Garrett said we are taking questions from everybody. Little known fact, the average podcast only goes 6 episodes.
Wow.
So, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever told you this before, but you are above average officially. So well done.
I've been waiting my whole life to hear that.
Well, today's the day. What a lucky guy you are. Okay.
Let's get into it. Let's answer some questions.
Okay. So actually,
You're up first.
I'm going to launch in, coming in super hot. So we source these questions from our Mindset Mastery people.
And here's the way this is going to go. So we've got questions from Discord. We've got questions from Instagram. And we've got questions on Zoom with people listening live. Nick's going to ask a question, and then I'll answer first, and Nick will answer, and then I'll do the same. I'll grab a question, and Nick will answer first.
And if you don't know what Discord is, that's actually an app that we use to facilitate the community that we have with Mindset Mastery. You keep referring to Discord like everybody knows what it is, so I just want to make sure that we have that out there. Okay, considering you have to answer this question first, I'm very curious. Something that you guys may or may not know. Garrett loves when you give him like prompts for his brain. Like this is literally something he's talked to me about. He's like,
we for the email that you guys read every week. If you don't know how that, I mean, I write it. Except Nick wrote this week for his episode. I write it, but what I said to Nick early on is like, I need you to prompt me. Give me I learned this about myself. Just a little inside thought to you guys. I learned this a lot about myself when people would ask me to tell stories about, like, hey, tell a cool story from the Navy, and I'd be like, I got nothing for you. Right. But then someone would start telling me about like an issue they were going through or a problem in their life. And immediately I could think of something that was very relevant to them. Yeah. And as I started to coach people in my life, I realized like, man, there's a level of depth in me that I don't pull out until it's needed. And so that's really when you prompt me, when you ask me, I've gotten better at that because I record everything and journal everything in my thoughts. But in the beginning, that was really what brought the most out of me. But I still operate that way today. I like being prompted.
And the way he said that is he's like, the way Garrett's brain works is, of course, he said it in the third person. I was like, dude, who are you? Anyways, okay. So here's one for Garrett's brain. And this comes from Christian Norton, who is actually on Mindset Mastery, but he also sent this on Instagram. And I'm curious to hear your thought. If you had 100 days to make $1 million or you catch a beat down, first of all, I don't think you'd be worried about the beat down, but like, let's say you were, how would you do it?
If I had 100 days to make $1 million.
To make $1 million.
Okay, well, I'll give a short answer, and then I'll try to give a practical answer. If I had 100 days to make $1 million, I would lean on some wisdom, such as Abraham Lincoln. If I had, 12 hours to sharpen an axe, I'd spend the first 9 hours, or 12 hours to cut down a tree. I'd spend 9 hours sharpening the axe, 3 hours cutting down the tree. What I wouldn't do is just take off and be like, well, I got to get going now. I only have a limited amount of time. I would see the end from the beginning, right? And so I would say, okay, if I have to make $1 million by the 100th day, like that doesn't mean, I have to be at $10,000 on day one.
Right. For sure.
Right. And if you look at the way that, you and I have done things, Nick, like it's taken us a lot more than 100 days, but scale happens over time.
Yeah.
And so that's not an easy thing to do, to make $1 million in 100 days, but I would see the end from the beginning. I would frame the whole problem. In a situation, I would frame the whole problem where it's like, okay, that's not an easy thing to do, $1 million in 100 days. But if I have to do that, here's the type of industry I would have to go in. Cause there's some things that you just can't, like in construction, one of my businesses, you're not gonna make $1 million in 100 days. Right. Like it's going to take you that long you got too long of a sales pipeline. So I would isolate into an industry, like what are some ways that I could make $1 million, probably sales. Right. Or, I would probably I would go into like insurance sales, or I would find I would leverage my network, honestly, to try and get to.
That's an interesting, that question. The reason I wanted to ask that, those types of questions are interesting. If you ever have a plan in your life, and let's say you have like a 5-year plan, or you have like a whatever time frame that you have, there's always questions that are good to ask. Like, if you had to do this in 60 days, what would you do? Or if you had to 10x your goal in the same amount of time, what would you do? The reason those types of questions are valuable is because they will shift you into a different frame of mind and hopefully help you see some things that perhaps you're not considering at the time. So my answer to that question, if I had 100 days, it's some of the things is like self-selection, or not self-selection, but selection of the right area. So who has a lot of money that it would, for them, $1 million wouldn't be a big deal? Well, I'd be looking at some sort of venture capitalist. Similar to Garrett, I'd be looking at leveraging my network. And if I had to make $1 million in 100 days, I would probably spend my time putting something together that I could pitch to an investor and get that $1 million, because I think that would probably be the most likely route that I know of at my disposal right now. So that's what I would do.
Okay.
All right, G, your turn.
Next question. I see this question in Discord from Adam Scott that I really like.
All right.
He said, I've been on an intentional walk with God this year. I tend to get in my own way so many times over and over again. History and habits tend to get me off track and I lose focus. I've been listening to the podcast and definitely have gotten value from it. I just struggle with implementing things. The question, what is one thing or a series of things I should focus on to improve implementing new habits, routines?
Oh, man, I love that question. I would say the number one thing that you should do is the Ivy Lee method for journaling. There is nothing that will help you to be more intentional about what you're spending your time on and really bring focus to your day than the Ivy Lee method. And I'll say the Ivy Lee method coupled with the Garrett Unkelbach twist. And the Garrett Unkelbach twist on that, if you don't know what the Ivy Lee method is, you basically write down your top 5 things for the day. And I do this every day and have done now for, I don't even know when we did the time management.
I do it on my Vibe board now.
Oh, you think you're better than me? I use paper. But yeah.
That's not what I was saying.
Oh, I know. It's just how I took it. But so you write down the 5 things, the 5 top things that you have to do for the day. And this was the Ivy Lee method. And if you don't finish it, you cross them out as you go. So A, that's very satisfying, which is odd, but it really does give you a little dopamine hit to cross something off your list. And then B, if you don't finish it, you move it to the next day. But where the Garrett Unkelbach twist comes and helps you with the focus, Adam, is that you write down before you even start the day, or if you do this the night before, you can really leverage yourself and wake up with a sense of like, I better get after it. You look at the day and you look at all your meetings, you look at your lunch breaks, whatever you have planned that is not actual focused and productivity time where you can work and do the things that are going to be on your list, and you write down the amount of hours. So today I had 2.5 hours total production time. I still had 5 things on my list. I've got 4 of them done right now. And I can tell you it's because I got back from an early morning meeting and I told my wife, I said, hey, I don't have much time and I have to be after it. She was amazing as always and made sure I had room to do that. And I just locked in and I got those things done. And that for me, it's so simple. But how many hours do you have in a day? And write your top 5 things down. You will be amazed at how much you can get done and how focused you are, because now when you start to get distracted, you've already set the parameters for yourself. You're like, I've got 5 hours and these are all big things. I don't have time to check Instagram or get distracted or wander off. And then you can also really consciously take hold of your discipline. If it's Adam, if it's a habit you're trying to put in, put that same habit down every single day as one of your 5 things. So that's my answer.
Okay, great answer. Let me give my answer. So Adam, you said history and habits tend to get you off track and you lose focus. And you're saying, what is the one thing I should focus on? So I'm going to give you my direct advice for you versus what might be general advice. And I definitely agree with what Nick said on Ivy Lee. It's a great tool for anybody to use. But I think what is going to help you the most, Adam, is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. For me personally, right? Like most people see me as extremely disciplined, or they think I'm just like automatically these certain ways. I would tell you what, if I was going to describe myself a certain way, what I am is very purposeful. And I know why I'm on this earth. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's really what drives everything else in my life. I'm not like this David Goggins discipline freak. I'm not someone who's just like a habit maniac or like just loves routine, but I am someone who knows very clearly why I'm put on this earth. And so I would tell you to increase focus on what you're doing, because what you want, right, when you're saying you want to implement habits, routines, you want to consistently do the same things over and over again. And you've got to have a reason to do those things over and over again. Not like, well, I want to have better habits. Mm-hmm. I want to have better routines. You're just trying to treat a poor symptom. But what will give you the most focus in your life, really where mission focus comes from, this extreme dedication to a cause, to a commitment. Like I talked about on like the example I've used on the podcast before, I never snoozed my alarm one time on deployment. Mm-hmm. That wasn't out of great discipline, right? That was because I was so focused on what we were there to do. When I woke up in the morning, it was all I can think about was the mission that we were on. So I would tell you to have a better sense of what your purpose is.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to listen to episode 10, Adam, that's on habits. We cover the three things that really, how you design a habit. And that's, honestly, I just listened to that episode recently. I would highly recommend it. All right, this is a great question from Ernie Beck, who is, once again, on Mindset Mastery with us, and also put this on Instagram.
And Ernie's on live with us. I saw him.
All right, Ernie, I love this question. This is like a great dinner question if you're out with people and you want to get to know them better, so you might want to take note of this one. If you could have dinner with 3 people from the past or present, who would they be and why? And they have to be real people. It can't be Neo from The Matrix, for the record.
Okay.
Yep. So there you go. Great just took all 3 of your people.
I'm going to go past.
Okay.
Because if I got to use my wishes, I'm not going to use my wishes on people that are living today. I'm just going to go make that happen.
Because exactly. Because one day they're going to want to meet you, right?
Exactly. So if I got to do people from the past, I'm going to go. I'm going to take Jesus off the table, because like everyone should want Jesus in their 3. So I'm not going to use Jesus while also identifying that you're gonna
go with like all the apostles and really look older.
I'm gonna say King David.
Okay, good one.
The Apostle Paul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an obvious one.
I'm gonna do 3 from the Bible, and then I'm gonna do 3 not from the Bible.
That wasn't the question, bro.
But I'm gonna answer the question the way I want to answer.
This is why Garrett is the way he is. Anyways, yeah, go ahead, dude. Yeah,
I would do Abraham, I would do King David, and I would do the Apostle Paul from the Bible.
Solid choices.
That's a hard one for me though, because honestly, like David or Joseph would be a hard one.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't get Joseph. You reference his life all the time.
Well, yes, but I feel like if I'm at dinner, because honestly, David experienced a lot more life than Joseph did.
Yeah, that's true.
Joseph spent a lot of time as a slave and in prison. His life is such a great lesson. But if I'm going to sit and talk with somebody, especially, I want to spend time talking with the man who God said is a man after his own heart.
Plus, Joseph is used to being like rejected, so he wouldn't be upset that you didn't invite him to dinner. So I get it. Keep going. Who are your 3 that are not in the Bible?
Not from the Bible. Definitely George Washington.
Okay, America.
Why George Washington for me would not just be like his sense of dedication to mission for this country, and then also the purpose and wherewithal to step down. I think is one of the most instrumental moments in history.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, literally everyone said like, no, you just be our leader. And he saw so much more purpose for our country that he said, no, I have to step down. And here's why. And he stepped down to a rival he didn't agree with. The man who took his position after George Washington, he didn't think was a good man. And he said, it's more important that this person take office than that I remain.
Huh. That's admirable.
I love George Washington for that. The other 2 people from history that I would really I would love to spend a lot of time talking to is Alexander the Great and Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So my, I gotta say your biblical 3 are pretty solid. It's hard to argue with that. I would, you would get really you get Old Testament, New Testament, So I'd have to agree with your biblical 3, even though that wasn't the question. So I'm going to answer the actual question. And I'm going to do non-biblical 3. So 1 would be Seneca. just because I think obviously one of the great Stoic philosophers. I just think it would be really fascinating to talk to him. Two, I would say William James, who's the father of American psychology. I think getting his perspective on things would be very interesting. And the third person that I would talk to, I'm inclined to say one of my musical heroes, but I feel like that would probably be disappointing because he would just be like all about rock and roll and drugs, which I like the music, but I wouldn't really have that much in common. So I was going to say Jimi Hendrix, but I'm not going to say Jimi Hendrix now.
I know I didn't pick really any culture people.
You picked exactly who I expected you to pick, if I'm being honest. My third one. Actually, you know what? I am gonna go with what I would like to talk with Paul McCartney. I just think about what he ushered in to society as far as the change to the way that pop culture is that the Beatles brought in. Plus, my mom and I've been raised a big Beatles fan. So there you go, a little bit of a different one.
I think Michaela's saying she's surprised that you didn't pick Tony Robbins, but
well, he's still alive.
Yeah, you're gonna get that chance,
Michaela, and I've shared airspace.
Okay, let's keep moving. Next question.
Guess what? It's your turn, bro.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right.
Cameron Schwartz, you asked a lot of great questions. I'd like to ask multiple of your questions, but I'm going to try to get to a lot of questions from the people who are here live because I really appreciate you guys being here live with us. And I'm glad, Cameron, that you highlighted the question that you most wanted answered, even though you asked a lot of great questions. So here's Cameron's question. It has been said that it will take war to accomplish your goals, war both in the physical sense and spiritual. How do you prepare for war each day? War against others, war against yourself? How do you create, build, grow this mindset?
I love that, man. Cameron, that's a great question. So preparation, Garrett's very good about talking about this. Like when you know your moment's going to come, you don't want to be surprised by it, right? So for me, the way I prepare for war, really it's a lot with my morning routine and a lot with what I do in my mindset. And the way I accomplish that is a few different things. Number one, the things that I don't deviate from are time with God in the morning, prayer, as well as gratitude practice. Those things are like everyday things for me because it conditions my mind. You bring God's presence in with gratitude. You enter his gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise. So for me, getting in the presence of God every day is an absolute must to prepare yourself for war. And then in the physical sense, I mean, there's a number of things I do from the standpoint of exercise and all that sort of stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and refer to the ice bath, which I feel is kind of boring because you guys all know about that. I feel like I should give you some sort of secret wisdom. But really, the more I lean into those things, the more I realize the compounding effect of doing the same things over and over and over again. I'm not going to steal Garrett's thunder, but I think about all the immediate action drills that SEALs do that he's talked about, where it gets, it's not sexy. Nobody gets excited about shooting a target from 3 yards away. But when you get so good at that, then you can start to do some of the more difficult things, but you have to master the basics. So for me, how do I prepare for war? It really is master the basics. It's the presence of God every day. It's for my spirit. It's refreshing my mind with things like the ice bath and making sure that I'm staying sharp through what I focus my mind on, what I choose to focus on. And then obviously with physical disciplines of the way I eat, the way I exercise, the way I run. So those are my answers.
Those are great answers.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just restate the question. How do you prepare for war each day? War against others, war against yourself. How do you create, build, and grow this mindset? Well, you're indicating something very important there, Cameron. War against others, war against yourself, and that you have an internal battle and you have an external battle. You need to be aware of both. But where I start really with like this war mindset for me is like this is a kingdom mindset, which we're going to talk about that some more. But also a war mindset for me, where it starts is with preparation. Like everything for me is about preparation. But I have a long time. We've talked about this in the podcast before in time frame orientation. I have a long time frame orientation, and I'm not thinking about like, how do I live a good life today? Yeah. How do I live a good life tomorrow? Like my focus is that when my life is over, it's done right. So like what that allows me to do is like I can go through many days in a row that are painful. I can go through many days in a row that are difficult. I can go through many days in a row where people, say negative things to me, all of that, because I'm not focused on the trophy of tomorrow. I'm focused on the only trophy to me that matters, which is at the very end of my life. So like that mindset is what allows me to prepare for war, because you have to look at it from the other way. Why are people not prepared for war? They pray that it'll never happen to them, or they pray that like that's, I mean, either I'm not going to need to, or it won't happen to me, versus like when from a young age, I got stuck on the quote. This is kind of the reason I joined the military, that evil prevails when good men choose to do nothing. And so like, I knew that like what that says. So evil prevails when good men choose to do nothing. Good men must choose to do something.
Yes.
Good men must be men of action, right? And that doesn't mean just like go out and start violence, but that means I have to be prepared for the right opportunities, and I don't know when the opportunities are going to come. So that's really like, there's a lot of things that cultivate that mindset. And then I would lean on what Nick said about the things that I do on an internal and external process, or on the internal and external daily for that process. That's spending time in the Word, that's spending time in physical, it's spirit, soul, and body.
Yeah.
But I would say deep beneath that is you've got to do that. You've got to have the mindset that makes it necessary for you to prepare for war, not to hope that war will never come.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't understand. Gary used to say that you want to be tested. And when you said that early on in the
We've
podcast,
got a question that I'm going to pick. If you don't pick it, that's about that.
Okay, well then I won't say what I was going to say.
Yeah, let's go to the next question.
All right, great. I'm giving this because I think it'll be helpful to everybody, and I honestly think that, Garrett, a lot of people would have this question for you. As a matter of fact, I know people will reach out to you with this question. So this one's mainly for you. I will weigh in after you. This is from MT_Michelle1 on Instagram. Looking to start a men's ministry at my church. Any advice?
Ooh, message me directly. Whoever asked that question, whether you're on here live with us or you catch this later.
I don't think they're on here live. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you catch this later, please message me directly, either on Discord or on Instagram. But for starting a men's ministry at your church, this is the advice. I've helped a lot of people with this. I'm going to go over a couple things really quickly. These are the things I cover with everyone who asks me this question. One, if you're trying to start a men's ministry inside your church, it needs to be in your senior pastor's heart.
Yeah.
If your senior pastor doesn't want to do it, it's not going to work, right? It doesn't matter what you want. That's part of understanding being under authority inside your church. So your senior pastor is the leader of your church. If he doesn't want to do a men's ministry, you're not doing one, right? Or it's not going to work correctly. So one, it needs to be in your senior pastor's heart for that to happen. You need his blessing and his direction on that. And then secondly, if you've got that and you're in that position to lead a men's ministry, the template for discipleship is for us in the Bible. And it starts with, who is your first disciple? That's what I add. Like, people come to me and ask me this question, like, man, how do I get 300 guys in my men's ministry? I said, you don't. I said, how do you get one person in your men's ministry?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it started for me, with a group of guys, some of them on this call, sitting around a table. And I just said, I want to do this with people. I want to do following God. I want to do advancing the kingdom with people who are as serious about this as the people that I was in the SEAL teams with. I'm not asking you to die for this, even though you should be willing to. What I'm saying is that this will be the most important thing in your life, that everything in your life will revolve around this. That's my entire life revolves around kingdom, which a lot of that is the men's ministry. My entire life revolves around it. It's the most important thing for me. I want to do ministry with those people. I don't want to do ministry with people who this is like a part-time thing. This is like I'm kind of into it. I want to be around people who are all in. And so this was just a small group of people. Not everyone sitting at that table was into it, right? Some of those guys aren't here anymore, but a couple of those guys from that very first table I sat at are some of our top leaders today in men's ministry. So it really just starts with, who is your first disciple, and don't really ever have a thought of like, I want it to be this size, because I don't even have that. What I've said is, I want to be a great disciple. Our senior pastor teaches, if you can lead yourself, you can lead another man, right? If you can lead yourself, you can lead a marriage. If you can lead your marriage and you can lead another man, you can lead teams of men. And so it goes back to stewardship, right? If you are faithful with little, you'll become ruler over much. If you can be a great disciple and discipler of one man, this is for women's ministry as well. If you can do well with one person, then God will bless you and anoint you with others, right? And those disciples, this is the difference between like replication and really reproducing, right? Like Paul reproduced himself into Timothy. And Timothy went on and reproduced himself into other people. He didn't need Paul. Right. Timothy went and did the work on his own. Right. If you'll make more disciples, those disciples will make disciples. That's the process that Christ created on the earth.
Yeah. I really just wanted you to weigh on that. I want to make sure that we stress. So you said, make sure you're in line with authority, that you have, that it's in your pastor's heart to do the same thing. And then 2, just be a faithful steward. And we've seen that. I think the more I go on, the more I think that the faithfulness of a steward is such a principle that you see everywhere, man. If you're just faithful over little, it grows.
It's the way the world works.
It really is the way the world works. You
don't even have to know God. It's the way the world works. It's a principle.
Yeah. All right, G, your turn to ask a question.
My turn. Okay. Walks asked this question. I'm going to let you answer this, Nick, even though this might have been more of a question for me. I think it's a great question.
Better not be a seal question.
Walk said, every man is asking the same question, quote, am I who I think that I am? For those of us not going into SEAL training, what are some good ways for a person to answer this question for themselves, especially if a physical condition is present that one cannot test themselves too much physically?
So, Walks, I saw that question in Discord, and I think it's a great question. Obviously, I don't know what your physical situation is. To me, the way you test yourself, and I'm guessing you're probably looking for some very practical how-tos, and I'm going to give you one simple thing that will apply to any area of your life. Do what you say you're going to do. Like, can you keep your word to yourself? I will tell you that is one of the biggest growth experiences I've had in my life of finding out who I am and growing in confidence in who I am as a person. It started whenever I did this thing called Project 40, where I decided to get in much better shape because I was pretty soft at that point. And I made some absolutes for myself. I said, I will not break my word to myself no matter what. So what that meant was eat everything from a workout. Like if I said I was going to do three sets of 10 and I was like dying on the second set, I did it. If it was like I told my wife I was going to take the trash out and I'm laying in bed and it's 9:29 and I'm tired and I remember, I better get up and take the trash out. To me, if you want to really test yourself and find out if you are who you say you are, start keeping your word on every single thing. The unlock that will create for you whenever you can be the type of person that just says, hey, I'm going to do this, and people go, okay, and they believe you, man, you will grow in confidence yourself and the benefits that are there for you. I mean, it's like Proverbs 22:1, right? A good reputation to be chosen over silver and gold. Like it really is. So that would be my answer.
That's such a perfect answer, because the am I who I think that I am is a confidence question, right? And so how do you build confidence?
Yeah.
Through discipline.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna leave that mostly on Nick's answer because he completely nailed that. But that's
like the first time in 100 episodes, man.
But
that's amazing.
But I will add one thing that you said, especially if a physical condition is present that one cannot test themselves too much physically. You know, the way you worded, I may be wrong, but the way you worded that answer makes me think that you may have some self-imposed limits. You may have some limits that other people have given to you that may be real, but not as real as you think they are. When my father was going through some serious health issues, he's talked about this before. If you're in our men's group, you've heard my dad talk about it. It's in our book that's coming out. My dad tells a story of like he's basically semi-paralyzed on the bed, and I come and sit with him, and I said, "Is this your life now?" Right? He has a lot of serious. This is years ago. A lot of serious physical conditions. I said, "Is this your life now?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I know you have some of the same dreams that I do of what our life is supposed to look like, of the things that we're going to do together. If you've seen on my Instagram, me and my dad went on a hunt to Africa this year." And I said, it doesn't look like you're going to do any of those things. And I know a lot of guys who have been through injuries way worse than you, who have been blown up, who've had their spines broken, who've been all this stuff. They're older. That's happened to them. They're older than you, and they're stronger than me. I said, you need to decide what you're going to get out of your life. So I don't know the physical conditions of the person asking this question, but I would tell you to test them, right? Like I'm not saying to go necessarily against your doctor's care, but at the same time, right? Like there was a guy in my boat crew in Buds. He made it through Hell Week. He ended up not becoming a SEAL. He failed a technical test, which is really sad. His name was Peterson. He failed a technical test, but he didn't fail a physical test. He lied on his Navy screener. He had asthma, not like I've got anxiety asthma. Like this dude has serious asthma issues. Like when no one was looking, I knew because he was in my boat crew, right? He told us, no one else knew. The Navy didn't know. You can't go into SEAL training with conditions like that.
Right.
This guy made it through Hell Week, like hiding an inhaler with asthma, because he said, this is my dream.
Wow.
Right. And so I just say that to say, like, that's not everyone's story. Not everyone has to do that. But also you don't have to accept, whatever the preconceived physical conditions that someone's given to you. You decide what your physical conditions are.
Yeah, really take that on board, because Garrett's using somebody else as an example, which is a very Garrett thing to do. But they told you weren't supposed to be able to walk again with your knee, and you're running ultra marathons. So you took your own advice. All right, G. Next question comes from our man Joe Peasy, who's also on Discord with us right now, or he's on the Zoom call. He's on Discord. He's in Mindset Mastery. It's a good one. I think you'll enjoy this, G. How do you teach your kids about goals and work ethic outside of being the example?
Ask it one more time.
How do you teach your kids about goals and work ethic outside of being the example?
Oh, outside of being the example. Well,
we're assuming that you are.
99% of teaching that to your kids about goals and work ethic is being the example. But let me give a practical on work ethic. So I worked with this guy. His name's Dr. C. It is a hard to pronounce last name. He's recently retired. He's 90-something years old. He worked his entire life in the psychology field. If you guys are familiar with the temperament profile DISC, it's like the oldest temperament profile. He inherited that from the original founder in the 40s. Dr. C has interviewed and mentally dissected tens of thousands of people. And he told me in my research, if someone doesn't learn work ethic by the age of 12 years old, right? Because he through my coach Phil, one of my mentors, I got to meet Dr. C, and he really told me about myself. It was a very interesting conversation. We talked for a while, and then he said, "Let me tell you about you."
Yeah.
It was an incredibly valuable conversation. But he said, if you don't learn work ethic by the time you're 12, this is in like my anecdotal research, Dr. C's saying, of tens of thousands of people throughout my career, and this is his profession. He's written books on it. If you don't learn it by the age of 12, you won't learn it short of a traumatic event. And he said, then he says to me, "Now tell me where you learned it."
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I hadn't felt like, I've never felt like hypnotized before, but like, I felt like he commanded it out of me in that moment.
Wow.
And like, I was like, yeah, at this hunting trip, when I was 10 years old with my dad, there's a trip where we're working on a hunting property. And for 2 weeks straight, I put fence posts in the ground at 10 years old.
Yeah. That's
right. And I remember coming back from that trip different. And so, I did another trip after that. When I was 12, I went to a ranch in Montana and cut bulls for a month.
Did you really?
Yeah. Huh. And like, I had opportunities like that in my life that really taught me work ethic.
Yeah.
And so I say that to answer your question, Joe. Don't just demonstrate it. Create opportunities for your children. My dad created both of those up. I did the one in Montana. He didn't even do with me. At 12 years old, he sent me with somebody who knew. Right, my dad couldn't take a month off from work, but he said, "I want you to go do this," and knew somebody. Sent me onto this ranch in Montana for a month, and then lots of times developing hunting property with my dad. But don't just demonstrate it, but at a certain age, you got to begin to create opportunities for them to learn work ethic.
I'd love to get that guy on from DISC. I think that'd be an interesting conversation.
I could probably get Dr. C to join us.
That'd be amazing. Anyways, so Joe, my own answer to that question, as somebody who has kids a little bit older than Garrett, number one, we talk about it all the time. Like, I pump my kids with the infinite potential unlock of God has a plan for your life, and you can have anything you want if you're willing to pay the price. And I highlight to them what the price pain that's going on daily. And so how it works in our house is my little guy is not quite at chore age yet. He's 4 and he's still busy breaking toys and being the human Hulk. But for the older ones, they have chores that they do, and we have them set up on a schedule where they get a set amount of cash each week for doing their chores. And that's something that my parents did with me when I was young. And I remember one time I said to my mom, I was like, me and my sister have really great work ethic. I don't know where it came from. And she looked at me like, I know where it came from. We held you guys to your chores. And when I was a kid, if you didn't do your chores, that was fine, but you weren't going to get any money. And then whenever we went to the store and you wanted to get toys or gum or whatever, little things that you wanted to buy, you didn't have any money. So it hurt. And where credit to my mom and my dad, they were very good at just being like, okay, now you're going to go ahead and feel the pain of this. And they would remind me, like, through my tears, you didn't want to do work whenever you had the opportunity to, so you don't have any money. And so you have to connect the pain and the consequence with the decision that they're making. We do this really well with my kids, and if they want to get something expensive, I encourage them. I'm like, look, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to wait for chore money, because I'm not trying to raise a bunch of employees. I'm trying to raise business owners and people that think outside the box. So I just ask them, like, what could you do to make money? And they start listing things off. So my kids will go in my neighborhood and sell. I mean, the most successful thing they did, they sold toys that they didn't want anymore 2 days after Christmas. And I support them always. So I went along with it, but in my head, I'm like, there's no way anybody's going to buy these toys. Well, they went out there on the park in our neighborhood and hustled every car that ran down. They were doing jumping jacks, cartwheels, getting their attention. They actually went and knocked on people's doors, which I was very impressed with. They made $180, man. You realize how much that is for if you're like 9 and 7? They were stoked, and I was so proud of them because I'm like, good, you just learned that when you want something, if you're willing to pay the price, you figure it out. And so we talk about these things when we break down. It's not just that I'm like, oh, congratulations, you were successful. We will sit down and I go, hey, why do you think that worked? And I'll have them list out everything they did. Where did you set up the table? Did you have me post something on Facebook? Did you, like all the things, so they understand that the principles that are impacting the decision, they won't necessarily remember it, but kids are great observers and not always the best interpreters. So I just want them to make sure that these things are being sewn into their head at this age. So that's what I do.
Great question, great answers. And I loved we had a lot of responses in the Zoom chat on that. People giving some insight or thought. Catherine, I love, I'm not surprised to hear that about your family, Catherine, you having chores before 4 a.m. on a ranch. Question for you, Nick.
Oh, okay.
From Sarah on Zoom.
All right.
I know you're going to love this question.
All right. I can't wait. You're being very kind to me with the questions. I'm not used to you being this nice, but there's other people around, so now I know why.
Question from Sarah on Zoom. How do I find my purpose?
Ooh, Sarah, that was a great question. We actually covered this, and the way you find your purpose, and this is I'm going to say to you up front, you're probably not going to love this answer, but it's to live purposefully. The inherent in that question is that you're searching for something to, like some sort of laid out purpose of this is what you're supposed to do. And there's a lot to be said for the strengths that you have and things that you will discover. But the way that you discover your purpose is, number one, if you're a follower of Jesus, and I believe that you are, your purpose is to glorify God. And what that means is that glorify means to make known. So what is your purpose? It's to make God known in every single thing that you do. So if you think about the characteristics of God and the nature of God, God is excellence. God is greatness. God is, he's love. Look at all the different traits and the nature of God, and make that known in your work. So what does that mean? That means in every single thing that you do, be all in, be the absolute best that you can be, right? And really go for it and do it as unto the Lord, like it says in the word. And I promise you, when you start elevating your standards like that, good things will start to happen, because like we talked about earlier in this podcast, you'll be being faithful with little. And what will happen is you're not going to kind of suddenly go one day, oh, this is it. What will happen is you'll look back and you'll start to connect some dots. And it's amazing how people show up when you just start doing things. If you listen to my story, which was the podcast we released most recently at the time of this recording, you will have heard my own story about how I was just going all in on things and working as hard as I possibly could. And someone always showed up. I couldn't see the next step. I couldn't see how this was going to lead to where I really wanted to get, and I couldn't really see if it was going to lead anywhere. But there was always somebody that would just show up, see I was doing an excellent job, and suddenly things started happening. So it's not necessarily an answer that you will love, but the answer to finding your purpose is to start living purposefully.
Fantastic. I'm going to answer the question, but real quick, and you can see it in the text channel for the 100th episode. Congratulations to Ernie for winning the 100th episode live giveaway. Let me show Ernie what he won, and then I'll answer the question. Ernie, we just had Josh on the podcast, and so
Josh Kraft.
Yeah, Josh Kraft. So his episode will be coming out next Monday.
Before this one.
Yeah, before this one, actually. His episode will come out, and he signed a copy of his book for you. So, Ernie, I'll get your address, and we're going to mail this to you. You got a signed copy of Pastor Josh's book.
Called The Way to Live. It's about a philosophy.
Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what they're going to get everyone gets for being on the live call. This is just for those who are on the live call.
Just for those who are on the live call. And actually, this is great for Sarah's question, because Sarah, this will help you with living purposefully.
There's just a couple people that are on with us live that did this call with us.
Oh yeah, a couple of you guys already have this. So for those of you that already have it, although they have the guide, but they don't have access to the video. So So we do something called the Ideal Me, and it is a very, very powerful.
We're kind of beta testing some products.
We are, and it's something that we will probably do. Well, we will do it in future. But Ideal Me is where you do it's like a vision casting for the person that you want to be. Right. And we sit down with you and we walk you through a series of prompts and different guides to help you develop. When you hear Garrett talk about his third person, he's talking about who he knows he can be. And sometimes he has to talk to present day Garrett and be like, look, this is not who you are. So we take you through this exercise that it's a 30-minute video. It's about a 35-minute video, actually, and it's a teaching on Ideal Me where we walk you through the whole thing, and then we give you the guide so you can go ahead and spell out your own ideal you. I will tell you that for me personally, I did this completely independent of Garrett whenever I learned that he had one, and I worked it out, and then collectively we pooled our heads. That Ideal Me is something I keep in my phone. I read it regularly. I've actually had it printed on a journal. One of my best friends had it printed for me on a journal. I look at that all the time because some people wake up in the morning and do declarations. I do those as well. But when you can look at an ideal you that you've created, that you've written out, you come up with this ideal you statement, and it creates an image, and you can literally, I'm closing my eyes as I say it, and you can see the person that you're becoming, and more importantly, you can feel that person. Man, that is literally putting the hook on your chest and pulling yourself forward into a better future, and it's powerful. So just for being on this call, you guys all get access to that. You'll get the guide and you'll get the video.
Okay, now my turn to answer this question.
Yes.
How do I find my purpose? Well, let me tell you this. You will fully know your purpose when you die, right? And I say that to kind of shock you so that you'll catch this, Sarah, and remember this, that you really won't know your entire purpose for your life until after you're dead. You can have done everything and felt like you caught the purpose of your life, but when you die, you'll see your life in a different context, in an eternal context. Some of us could live lives that we thought were so significant that we actually missed our purpose, and quite the opposite. Some of us could live lives that felt very insignificant, and we accomplished a great purpose. Because for many of us, our purpose in life goes far beyond our own, like our living existence. So the way that Proverbs 16:9 says, a man chooses his path, but the Lord directs his steps, right? That scripture is very indicative of the way purpose works and the way that Nick and I have talked about it previously on the podcast, is that you don't really find your purpose as in like, oh, well, I dug it up. Here's my keys. It doesn't exist in that way. You continually discover pieces of your purpose, and God, in the same way that God gives you faith, God reveals to you the things that he's going to use you for. And that's on a daily basis, right? You can have vision for the future, right? And you can have a plan for what your future is supposed to look like. Joseph's story is my favorite example of that in the Bible, right? He had a great vision of being a leader. And then for 13 years in his life, like he was basically going backwards. He felt like nothing is working out. And then then Joseph's vision kind of becomes true, becomes leader, becomes this high position, but his purpose was greater. Joseph's purpose was greater than he really ever knew that it was. God used Joseph to save the entire Israelite people from death and starvation through a famine. Right. So all Joseph had a dream to be was just a leader. So I say that to say as an example of you won't ever fully know your purpose, but you do have to learn how to live purposefully. Right. And you live purposefully or purposefully by learning to know that God has a plan for your life, by continuing to seek him daily, by leaning on the dreams that God puts in your heart, and then doing things in an eternal perspective. Listen to our podcast on this, where we go into a deep dive on this, but I just want you to take that away. You won't ever fully find your purpose. You're not going to get like a bronze plaque that says, Sarah, here's your purpose.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah. I've got a fun one. And then I've got one. I'll do the fun one first. Okay. And this comes from your favorite person in the world. And I think it's interesting because I'm curious to hear your thing. So what is each of your favorite podcasts? Because we've done, this is kind of self-indulgent, but we've done 100 now.
Okay. I would say, honestly, I give 3 favorites.
Well, dude, okay. Yeah, you just do whatever you want anyways. I don't know why we have questions.
I would say my 3 favorites are Pastor Josh,
right,
Pastor Keith, and favorite of my own. Sorry, I'm not going to pick your story as my 3rd favorite.
Dude,
I would say my 3rd favorite is such an early one, and it's almost due for a version 2. What would be one of our first episodes on resiliency?
Yeah, well, we did a version 2.
That's right. We did.
Yeah. Glad to see that you're just along for the ride. Anyways, yeah, great job, dude.
I was thinking we did, but then I couldn't remember the episode number. So,
dude, we don't remember episode numbers anymore because we have this keyword search tool. G, you may have heard of it.
Boom.
Best thing that ever happened to me, so I don't have to listen to you ask me questions anymore. Anyways, favorite podcast. I will go ahead and, even though I criticize you for it, I will say there's 2 for me. Number 1, and it's because I feel like it was one of the, I gave my big 4. There's so many that like really were so personal for me. But I think the Principles one was probably my favorite of all time, simply because I felt like that was such an unlock for me personally. I think if you look at what I've listened to, I mean, obviously I listen to our own podcast, and I'll usually listen to them once and just kind of listen to it from a different headspace because I'm not producing it. And that one I listened to multiple times because you can't tell on the episode, but you were definitely, way ahead of me on that one. Like I truthfully felt like my head was in quicksand the whole time, and I just sort of held it together. Why are you laughing, man?
I think it's great. I appreciate that.
I feel like that's not what you're really thinking, but whatever. But yeah, so that would be my favorite one. My favorite guest, surprisingly, and I feel bad because I've loved all our guests, but Joe Musselman was actually my favorite guest.
Love Joe.
Yeah.
Love Joe.
I thought
one of my best friends.
One of your best friends, but didn't make your top 3. Anyways, but
That's okay. You didn't either.
Bro, your story was my least favorite. What do you think about that? It wasn't. But yeah, no, Joe Musselman's podcast for me was the other one that I'll mention because I just remember, man, it was on purpose actually. So Sarah, listen to Joe's. You had that question.
I was so glad to share Joe with other people because every time people meet Joe, they love him.
Yeah, he balances you out well because he's very likable.
Okay, my turn with the question.
Yeah.
My man Sam asked this question.
Let's go, Sam.
He said, do you have a system for evaluating partners? And would you evaluate friends and business partners differently? And if so, how?
Ooh,
so
very good.
Would you evaluate friends and business partners the same? Question 1.
Yeah.
And how would you evaluate them?
So I do evaluate friends and business partners very different. I've said this. I'm only in business with 2 people. One of them is sat to my left here. And then the other one is my partner in my production company. And I've had lots of opportunities, and I don't say that that's not an arrogant thing. It's just if you know enough people will be like, hey, we should start a business. And I used to think about this with my friends. So I look at starting a business the same way I would look at starting a marriage. And I would I'm obviously married the best woman in the world. So but I was very selective. I wouldn't just dive into it. And the reason is because if you think about it, you're going to share accounts with this person. You are going to be legally bound to them. And you need to make sure that they have that you're compatible as far as how you work, and that you have the same values, right? And that you have mission alignment. And so I guess in some ways I would have similar trends or similar criteria for my friends. I just think that with friends, you typically don't have a bank account and a legal entity between the 2 of you. So it's like business is a little bit more entangled. And you also have to have, there's so many other things that come in as far as business plan, viability of the business, the market. Like there's a lot of things that come into it besides that. But when I'm talking about just the person, I'm going, do we have the same values? Because if we're in values conflict, I'm out, right? It's just like that's a killer straight away. And what I mean by that is, we've done episodes on values. I'm not going to break into that. And then second thing, are we aligned on mission? So the purpose of a business is not to make money, despite what we see all around us, right? The purpose of a business is to solve problems.
Add value.
Right, and to add value. So am I sat there with somebody that we have the same mission and view of what we're doing in the business? Because if they're just like, I want to make as much money as possible, at some point we're going to come into values conflict because I'm not a money-motivated person. Like, obviously I need money and I like to make it, but it's not the number one motivator for me in any area of my life. So for friends, it's a very similar thing. Values alignment is the absolute number one thing. And then where I'm at in my life, I would say, yeah, once again, it's mission as well. I guess they are very similar, but there's just a little bit more entailed for the actual business side.
That's a great answer.
You're being very positive this episode. This is amazing. It only took 100 episodes, and I feel so good.
It only took a live audience for me to be nice to you.
Yeah, that's more accurate. Did you guys come every episode? Seriously?
I will give one way, Sam, that the way I evaluate friends and business partners is the same. I'll give one thing because I have a lot of things, so I don't want to take like a super long answer. One way that I evaluate them the same is this is my number one qualifier for who's in my life is attitude. Right? Because attitude to me, it's the one thing that you can choose. And if you choose to be negative, I'm not going to choose you. I want my life to be positive. I want to have a positive impact on the world. I want to be a positive person. I want to give. I want my life to be, full of love and generosity and helping other people and just being a gift to the world. And when you're negative, you're none of those things.
Yeah.
And if you your attitude is a choice, right? And so like we've talked about in Mindset Mastery and on the podcast here, it's the statue, right? Like who are the statues that I want next to my statue? I don't want like negative, sad statues, hateful, angry statues next to mine. I want to be around a bunch of positive people. So that's the one way that they're the same. For evaluating business partners, This is just some general wisdom for everyone in this who's listening. Be very, 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 very slow to take on a business partner.
Yeah.
Don't just like jump into business with people the same way that you wouldn't just jump into a marriage with a person. When you get into business with someone, you're getting into business with them, with their, like, if you've ever been an employer before, you don't just employ people.
Yeah.
Henry Ford said, I tried to hire a pair of hands, but instead I got the whole person, right? You think it's hard with employees. It's even harder with business partners. Mm-hmm. You're not just a partner to them in business. You're a partner to their personal life. You're a partner to their issues. You're a partner to their finances that you're aware of, that you're not aware of. Right, like do not jump into that relationship quickly. The people that I will be like, I'm in business. I'm a business partner with two people. One is my dad. The other is Nick. And this engagement that Nick and I started together, like Nick offered. We've kind of told some of our story. I'll just go over it really quickly because there's some points in there. You offered like, hey, I think you should do this. I think we should do this together. Here's what I'm willing to do.
Yeah.
Right. Nick didn't start with what he could get out of it. Nick also showed me from the very beginning, like I said, hey, all right, let's do this. One, I liked working with you when I was coaching you in that season, and you had already proven to me at that point, like I've said before, you're the best coach. You didn't last very long, but you're the best coaching client I ever had of all my coaching clients. And I've got a lot of great coaching clients, people that I love, a couple of them on this call. You're awesome. Don't take this as not.
Yeah, I feel amazing. This is like,
but everything I asked you to do, like you did it twice over. Right. And you came back hungry for more the next time. So that showed me like your drive and your desire, which is something I look for in a business partner. I could list a lot of the points. What the point that I really want to make the most and keep this short is that Nick and I had a relationship that was great. Like, I knew after day one that I wanted to marry my wife, right? But we didn't get married on day one.
Right.
That continued to prove itself out. Nick showed himself to me very early that we could be great partners together. But I used some wisdom. I put some protections in place. I did not jump into that. And there was a point where I was like, you know what? I think, I'm ready to be in business with Nick. And we still weren't in business at that point. There was a point where I was good with it. My family's good with it. I'm ready to be married to Lindsay, but we're still not married yet. And my one of the most important mentors in my life, Pastor Keith, he says, time doesn't tell, time reveals. Yes. Right? So do not rush hastily into a business partnership.
Right. And what Garrett said there, that kind of you didn't say it in these exact words, but you have said this exact phrase before, and I've used it, trajectory. That's really what you summed up there. And for friends, that's a really important one for me, is its values and trajectory, because I am committed to growing better the rest of my life. And so somebody that just wants to be comfortable is going to deselect themselves from my life.
I have friends like you're, like a Barnabas to me. I have other friends. I have people that are Timothys in my life from like a discipleship ministry standpoint. I have they're obviously people that are kingdom people, but I have friends that I would say are like a Timothy. Yeah. Like, I just want to give to you. Right. But I can't do that with very many people. So I'm very selective in the people that I think like, man, this person just look how much they can do with a little. Yeah. Right. In the same way, if I was doing angel investing, I'm going to invest in the people that I think have the greatest potential. I'm going to give because you have different types of friends, right? I don't just have friends that are like for me. I have friends that like, you do nothing for me. I just want to give to you. For sure. But then I want to give to the people that'll do the most with it. Yeah. All
right. We should probably do a couple more here, G. We're at 52 minutes. If you can.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us, guys.
Thank you, guys. All right. So this is one from Megan Elenia on .igp on Instagram. This is an interesting one, G. I think you'll enjoy this. How do you balance being confident in your calling while also walking in humility?
Say it one more time.
How do you balance being confident in your calling while also walking in humility?
That's a good one. I want to make a good point on this. So how are you confident and humble at the same time?
Yes.
Right. So humility is, I would say like confidence is misunderstood, but humility is even more misunderstood. And a lot of people's impression or thought of humility is, that I don't talk too much about myself, or that you don't think too highly of yourself. Yeah. Right. I'm someone who, like, when I was young, people would call me arrogant, and I didn't nobody knew that it bothered me. It actually hurt me very much. Like, I'm not hurt, wounded by that. Like, I'm hurt, Lord, I don't want to be that. Yeah. Like, that was really my internal conversation. Like, I don't and I would say, I would pray, Lord, if I am that way, I don't want to be that way. right? And the same way about humility. Humility to me, like this is like it's a joke, but it's also serious. The most humble I'll ever be is telling people I'm not that humble. I have no desire, like I'm not trying to, like I don't want people to know me as humble, right? Like humble is one of those things that you just do with your life, and like it's one of those things you don't really talk about it. You just have to be it. To me, confidence and humility. When you have them and they come from a healthy place, you'll have both at the same time.
Yes.
If you only have confidence, but you don't have humility, it tells me your confidence does not come from a healthy place.
Right.
If you have humility and no confidence, right, it tells me that your humility comes from weakness or insecurity.
Right.
Right. And so like really when it does come from a healthy place of knowing who God is, having a desire to serve, and also understanding that some people may just have the wrong impression of you and you need to have just a Christ-like spirit about that. I'm sorry, I don't want that. What I want is to love people. Christ wasn't like, what, you guys sinned and screwed it up, so that's your bad.
Yeah.
Right? That's not how Christ was. Right? And so if you'll have that Christ-like character, also walk in the authority that God has for you. Like I put you on this earth to do things. I have a plan for your life. Love people, be generous. Like that's where confidence, humility comes from. I think in that sense, when you have both of them, it has to come from Christ-like character.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I'll use a quote from my man, Garrett Unkelbach, who says that confidence inspires other people, whereas arrogance repels them.
Yeah.
And I think if you could sum up how you walk confidently while also being humble, if your focus is on other people, it's going to be very hard for you to get arrogant, right? And so if you are truly walking in a way that's confident and inspiring other people, what does a confident person do? They don't need to attack other people. They don't need to be worried about what people are thinking about them because they're focused on others so they can be encouraging. So I will just say that a very simple way to balance that is just to keep your focus on serving other people, which is also a Christ-like character.
Speaking of generosity, Ernie messaged and asked if he's going to be in town next week and get his own book signed. He asked if he could give his book away.
Oh, snap.
So yes, we can do that. I'm going to re-roll really quick in the Discord.
All right. Do you want me to pick a question, G, while we're doing this?
I've actually got a question.
Oh, look at you, multitasking.
I can multitask. Let me give you the question you can answer, and I'm going to re-roll.
All right, sounds good.
This next question, let me find it, was from Jensen. Which is our guy, my man, Jensen. Which is a desirable virtue that could be considered a prime virtue, or virtue that, if present, a whole slew of other desirable virtues kind of comes with the package or rides shotgun with? So he's saying, like, what's the number one virtue?
Ooh, man.
I like this question because I know what my answer is.
Well, then why don't you go ahead and answer it, G? Because I'm not.
No, you're up. You got it,
dude. I believe in you. I gotta look at a list of virtues.
What,
dude? Well, okay, we just talked about the four virtues.
I will answer.
This is not one that I'm as well prepared in.
So here's my answer, Jensen. The prime virtue, in my opinion, that I think so many other virtues come from. I've said it this way: if you want to live a miserable life, make life all about you. If you want to live a great life, make life about other people. The number one distinction, like if you can look at anyone in the world and put them in a category, right? Like, and you don't always want to black and white the world because there's a lot of gray areas in life. But if you want to black and white the world or black and white a person, it is that person is selfish or that person is selfless. Your life is either about you or your life is about other people. If your life is about you, your ability to be virtuous is incredibly limited. If your life is not about you, your ability to be virtuous is limitless. I think that's the prime virtue by far. So I just re-rolled, and my man Johnny Croft won book from Pastor Josh.
Congrats, Johnny.
Winner Johnny.
Ernie, that was good of you, man. I feel like we should give Ernie something when he's out here.
We'll see.
All right, Ernie. There you go. It pays to be a winner, and it pays to be a giver. All right, G, I'm curious about this one. I think this is going to be an interesting question. What is?
Are you just going to skip?
I'm just going to skip. Well, did you answer it well? I mean, honestly,
okay, that's fine. I'll give you one pass,
dude. Whatever, you'll give me one.
I'll give you one skip,
dude. Whatever. I'll take whatever I want. The point is I'm going to make a point about why I didn't answer that. I could look at the list of virtues and I could have answered, but one of the things that I actually think we all need to take on board, and I say we all as in like all of society, is your opinion is not always valuable, right? Like if you are just forming an opinion based off of like a headline that you read or you saw a couple of bullet points and you're giving this opinion, it's not valuable. But yet we see social media filled with people who are pushing their opinions, thinking they're very valuable. And in that case, I didn't feel like I had something to offer, which is why I skipped that. So just wanted to say, okay. This question, once again, comes from your favorite person in the world, but she asked a bunch of questions, and I thought this was a really good one that I'm kind of curious to hear, and it's also for the 100th episode. I feel like it's the right time to answer this. What is the number one thing you guys have learned from this podcast?
Number one thing we've learned from the podcast?
That is the question.
Since you skipped, I'm going to let you answer first.
Oh, I'm going to let you skip, bro. Yeah, anyways. Okay. The number one thing I've learned from this podcast, honestly, I would say stewardship, man. I would say that the faithful over little, ruler over much principle of stewardship has just been such a constant reminder to me. I think it's, truthfully, our heart in doing this is nothing to do with myself or Garrett. I have no desire to be well known or anything like that at all. And I'm not saying I'm well known because I don't think I am, but I'm just saying it is really about putting things together to help other people. And what I've seen is like early on, I remember we did an ice bath event, our very first ice bath event. And this is where the stewardship really hit home for me. At this point, we've been doing that podcast for like 3 months. We did an ice bath event like locally here in DFW. And I think we had I want to say we had about 12 people. It was not a big turnout at all. But I just remember the guys that did turn out, we had such an incredible experience. B, a guy who is now one of my best friends, who's also the sole sponsor we have, Chris Hudson.
I know.
Freedom Plunge.
That's crazy.
Turned up. I didn't realize,
Chris is such a part of our life.
He is.
Started a business. He's our main sponsor, and he's just one of when we were tiny, one of the 12 people that showed up.
Yeah, and we didn't know who he was. I remember we looked at the roster of who was coming. I'm like, who's this? He's like, I have no idea. Because we knew some of the guys. They were from church, and we're out there. It was January 29th, and it was
he was new to church.
And we didn't realize where he was at in his life. His life has had radical turnaround since then. And so I say all that to say, I remember we spoke and I said to you, I was like, man, I was really hoping to get more people. And you said, you're like, look, faithful over little, ruler over much. And I said, okay, so we're going to do this as if we had, 100 of the most important people in the world there. And that's what we did. We did everything the way we did. It was, we looked at all the details. We designed the event. We did the whole thing. And we had a great event. And I just remember seeing people having breakthrough in that ice water. And I say all that to say, the lesson to me is that God is always working, and when you're completely unaware of it. I didn't know, because if we were being unfaithful, we would have been like, oh, let's just cancel it. And who knows what would have happened to Chris? Maybe I don't even know him now, and I would have been missing out on a best friend. And so that to me is always one of my biggest lessons and takeaways. And I'm so grateful for that.
I know we're at time, but there's really a couple more questions. I don't know if you've got a couple more.
No, you take all the questions now.
I've got a couple more that I'd really like us to. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more that I'd really like us to answer. I thought were great.
Do I have to answer all these first, or are you gonna? Since you,
well, how about this? I'll ask these last few questions, and if you don't want to answer it or don't have an answer, I'll answer it. But okay. I want to get to all these questions.
Let's do it.
Andy Stevens asked. There's so many questions, and thank you guys, everyone who sent in questions. There's just a few that I've noticed that I still really want to answer. Andy Stevens asked, what are your best strategies to interact with or have meaningful discussions with people who are closed off to the Bible and its vast lessons?
Say that again, please.
What's the best strategy to interact with people who are closed off to the Bible?
Oh, yeah. Great question. Okay, so Andy, I think the number one thing is the reason people are generally closed off to the Bible or to Christianity or to following, is because they've seen people who aren't about it. Right. And so the best thing you could do is one, to absolutely live full out, because people are always paying attention, and people may not respect the gospel. They may not respect the Bible, but they will respect somebody who is who they say they are. So I would say the number one thing is in your character. And then the number two thing, we actually were talking about this at the Bible study yesterday that Garrett and I were at. God is always working on people. And what I mean by that is if you look at Acts, there's so many times whenever they're preaching to different people and telling them the gospel. And when they're speaking to people who are Jewish, they start with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? They start with things that they know, and then they show how Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament and the Old Covenant. When they're speaking to people I think it's Acts 16, whenever Paul is talking to some Stoic philosophers, that he comes in and he says, hey, you have you guys are a very religious people, right? Establishes rapport with them straight away. So am I. Great, we're the same. And he says, you have a God that you says to an unknown God. Well, I'm here to tell you who that unknown God is. So what I'm saying is that God will be working someplace in their life. Your consistency and the authenticity of who you are will be the biggest testimony to them. And I would just say to not get hung up in the moment, because man, things change very, very quickly because you have no idea what's going to happen. But what I will say is God's always working, so you just got to be sensitive to see where that's at. And remember, you're there to sow seeds. We get caught up on outcomes. You may be the person that sows the seed and somebody else reaps later, but you've just got to focus on being obedient.
Andy, I will give you and I can talk more about this later, but I will give you one thought on this strategy and that everyone else can use for a strategy on how to work or how to introduce the Bible to people. I told this story at Mighty Men before. This was last year. I had two like really great examples back to back. One, I got to do a keynote to a room of like some of the most high level people in venture capital, multiple billionaires in the room, a bunch of founder CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, and a few dozen like very successful CEOs. I did a keynote for them, and I used I told some philosophy stories and I told biblical stories in this room where this is like, I mean, we're on the West Coast and like a godless place, and I'm not just taking a shot at California. Tech is very is not God based in tech, and so anyways, I told some stories. I used the authority that God gave me as a SEAL. I told some other stories that mattered, and then I told some biblical stories. And I didn't quote scripture. I told a story. People hear stories.
Yeah, they do.
Right, and so I did that there, and I had I wasn't like telling a message. I said, this is a story from the Bible, and I presented it as authoritative along some other things that I knew this audience accepted as authoritative. So I wasn't trying to preach a message. I just introduced a biblical story authoritatively next to other things that my audience recognized as authoritative, and it had an impact on them. And some of these people came up to me afterwards and like, I've never heard, I had so many people say, I've never heard the Bible talked about in that way, right? Because then the Bible was so foreign. And I told a very common story that made sense to them. Exact same story. I was in a van with a bunch of people way higher up than me, and one of the a lower executive at Amazon. And again, I told a story. I told a story we were just talking, and I wait for a good opportunity to speak. And I said, if I'm gonna speak in this van with these people, I'm gonna make sure that the people in this van who don't know me get to hear about God. And I told a story from the Bible. I didn't quote scripture, right? People who are opposed to God and opposed to the Bible, right? They don't like that. Right. But when you say, there's this story, you have everyone's attention when you introduce a story. And the fact that I said this is a story in the Bible doesn't necessarily lose people. So Andy, I would tell you one of the best ways to introduce the Bible to people is learn stories. And when you're learning the Bible, don't try to like focus on memorizing so much scripture as well as you need to learn the story of the Bible.
Very good.
Couple more questions. I think you'll like this one, Nick.
All right.
Catherine said, pattern behavior is something that is very difficult to change, especially when it's been instilled since childhood. After 25, when the human brain reaches full development, making changes to ingrained behavior is even more challenging. For the listeners out there that had a challenging upbringing, lack some guidance or teaching, those who may feel broken and beyond help, what is your advice for the first step to take in their search for growth or improvement? So people, maybe to synthesize that question a little bit, how do you move someone from fixed mindset to growth mindset?
I feel like you have an answer for this one first.
No, go ahead.
No? Okay. Well, hey, thanks for putting that back on me. Moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. I think for a lot of people, one of the things that I've noticed in every single person that has any sort of greatness is there has to be a belief, right? And moving someone from fixed mindset to growth mindset starts with people that have that usually have someone outside themselves that believes in them, or they see something else that makes them think that they can do it. I've had this conversation with people where they'll tell me that they're not disciplined, and they'll be like, "Oh, I can't be disciplined. I've never been disciplined my whole life," and they will tell you long stories of it. And I'll say, "I'm sure that you've got to have discipline in one area of your life." Nope, I can't do this, can't do that. And so in this specific example, I asked the question, I'm like, well, you start thinking, well, hey, what do you have in your life? Okay, well, I got this job. All right, whatever. Well, how did you get that job? So if you can highlight something, in this case, I highlight for a friend an area where she had been disciplined that she was completely unaware of, and then you start breaking it down, what it does is it shifts the belief, because what you have is a really ingrained story that is a wrong belief that's being backed by evidence. And if you think about beliefs are like tables that have legs for them, and the legs are the reference experiences. So what you've got to do is you've got to like knock some of those reference experiences out from what they're saying and start to build up new ones. Your reference experience can be of yourself, or it can be of something from around the world, somebody you know. So that's what I would say. I know that might sound like a little bit of a heady heady answer?
No, I think that's a good answer. Something we've talked about on the podcast before is insert belief, remove hesitation.
Right. Yeah. That's
right.
Good.
So if I was working with someone one-on-one, I'm going to try and diagnose like what for them, what is the hesitation? What are they stuck on? And you may not always know, but if I can work with someone one-on-one, I'm going to diagnose the hesitation. It's going to come from somewhere. I'm going to give them belief, and I'm going to try to pull that hesitation away from them. If you don't know, or you're trying to just move a mass audience, which by the way, that's what this podcast tries to do. The other ways is you educate people, right? Just educating people about growth mindset increases the likelihood that they'll move out of one.
Yeah.
Right. Show it, demonstrate knowledge and facts to people. You can inspire people. And then the other thing, one of the things that's natural to me, that's not always natural to people, but is a method, is to push or challenge people.
Yeah.
Right. Some people just by competition or by being pushed is the only thing that'll move them. For other people, it doesn't work for them at all. But when you don't know and you want to help as many people as possible, work through all of those.
Yeah, and if I was going to dive in deeper, and I'm not going to because I know we don't have a lot of time, pattern interrupts. You talked about patterns of behavior. I think we covered this on the anxiety. It really starts with awareness. Once you grow in the awareness of where the pattern begins, you have to interrupt the pattern early on. It's like you kill a monster when it's a baby, not when it's fully grown, right? So just that's another thought process. So
we're going to do one more question, and I've got like 15 other questions that I'd love to answer. So again, just thank you to everyone who wrote in questions, who's been on with us.
Yeah.
This has been fun, and I'd love to do this more.
Flown by,
and maybe
man.
We'll figure out some other opportunities to do this.
Yeah.
Last question from my man Jeremy. If you don't want to answer this question, you can't, but I bet you'll have a thought on this one.
All right.
Is it advantageous for a person to stick more closely to God-given talents as their identity, or to build up or encompass developed strengths plus God-given talents into their identity? So should you focus on just God-given strengths or also develop strengths?
Well, I think I would go with the latter. And that's with an asterisk. So the reason I would say that it's the latter on your question, Jeremy, is because if you're a growth-minded person, you're going to constantly be developing yourself. You're not going to be okay with being like, well, I just suck at that, right? Like, so you're always going to have some personally developed strengths. I would say that you should spend a lot more time honing your God-given ones, though, because you will get a lot more. A lot of people want to identify their weaknesses and spend all their time working on their weaknesses. I think that it's a lot more valuable to really make your strengths as strong as possible, but I'm also not excusing. For example, Clifton Strengths Finder, and if you read, there's a book out there. I want to say it's From Good to Great, but that's not the book. That's the book is escaping me right now, but there's a book that goes along with Clifton Strengths Finder, and if you do Clifton Strengths Finder, they will talk about how much more important it is to spend time honing your strengths, and there's a lot of backup evidence to that. But for example, in Clifton Strengths Finder, one of my bottom 5 is empathy. I'm not a natural empathetic person, but I can't say like, oh, well, that's not one of my God-given strengths, so I'm just going to leave it, because then I would just be going around hammering people, and that's not okay. So I think it's the latter.
If I had 30 minutes with somebody, or an hour, like for coffee.
Right.
I did this a lot when I was leaving the military, and I've done a few of these. I don't get to do them all the time. It's hard to make time for everything. But if I was going to meet with someone and help them, like, what do I do? Right? Because that's the question. And really, I think the question that you're asking, Jeremy, is a question of what do I do? Like, what strengths do I use? Do I use just my God-given strengths, or do I use developed strengths? Because if I'm going to use developed strengths, that means I'm going to focus on developed strengths. If I'm going to help you develop, what do I do tomorrow? What do I do in the next 5 years? What do I do with the rest of my life? I'm going to look at 3 areas. One, what are your God-given abilities, right? So look at God-given strengths. I'm going to ask you what's in your heart, right? Like, what are the dreams that God's given you? And then the third thing we're going to talk about, and this is more relevant to where you start today, is what's in your hand, right? Yeah, so what are your God-given abilities? What's in your heart? What are your dreams? And then the last thing I'm going to ask you is what's in your hand. And so what's in your hand could be developed strengths, right? What can I do right now, right? Not, well, if God gave me this, then I would do that. No, what can I do right now? What did God give me, right? What can I do right now? And how can that get me to what God's put in my heart, right? Those are the 3 things that I would focus on.
That's really good.
Jeremy, we had one last request. We'll go one more. Andrew asked if we'll answer the other question. Let's see. Yes, Andrew, we will, and then we're not going to take any more questions. Let me find what you're asking me to answer.
What Andrew, can you write what you wanted us to answer? Because Garrett's searching through. There's a lot of questions on here.
Andrew's typing.
All right. Well, this is like
suspense.
I'm just going to go ahead and say this is the greatest episode we've ever done, because it's the nicest you've ever been to me. So I'm glad that our century episode really was the one.
Just warn you, don't get used to it.
I will not get used to it. We also spent a long day. She said, yeah.
Okay, Andrew's asking if we'll answer these other questions. Maybe we will. We'll try to get to some via text. If not, we'll save them. I don't know what we're going to do. Oh, you know what? There is one last question I wanted to answer. Someone asked, I saw multiple questions in direct message. I saw in the Zoom about live events, about other things that we're doing. Let me just say this lastly. I don't want to overcommit or give too many details, but here's what I will say. So grateful for all of you who are in Mindset Mastery with us. If you're on this live call, it's because you're in Mindset Mastery with us. This is just the beginning for Nick and I. We are extremely focused on excellence, and we have a lot of ways that we want to make Mindset Mastery better, and we're doing that as fast as we can. The faster we grow, the more time we can put into Mindset Mastery. I will tell you, Nick and I have so much planned, and the only thing that's keeping us from doing more and offering more is our commitment to excellence in what we're currently doing. I don't want to do a bunch of 7s in my life. Sure. We're going to get Mindset Mastery to a 10, and then we have a lot of other things that we want to bring to you guys. So I look forward to that. It keeps Nick and I so excited. We wish we could just spend all day, every single day for months working on this stuff. And Nick and I would say slowly are continuing to increase our commitment to and the amount of time that we spend on this stuff. So we'll try to get to more of your questions in Discord. I think we're wrapping up.
We are. We have spent 4 hours podcasting today, G, because we did a double episode with Josh. So this has been a heck of a day. Guys, thank you so much for 100 episodes. Honestly, we appreciate every single one of you guys. And we look forward to 100 more.